Moving on to item number 8, amendment to the 2011 Recology Yuba City Collection Service Agreement for the Green Waste Diversion Program, presented by Mr. Steve Krager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. This matter was considered by your council at the last meeting. It did not proceed. It was a 2-2 vote, with Councilman Gill being absent. It was requested at that time that this item be brought back for reconsideration. It is therefore being brought back this evening. I would be happy to give you a full presentation, as I did at the last meeting, whatever's the pleasure of the council.
And I would ask Councilmember Gill if he had an opportunity to watch the video and get up to speed on the
Actually,
item.
before I left for the meeting, I was able to visit with staff and went through a list of questions, as well as Recology staff who I met with. So I want to thank staff. I thought you guys did a great job answering a lot of those questions then. I did go online and watch the video, so you don't need to go through the whole presentation, but thank you.
And so, Mr. Mayor, I'd ask if there are any, actually there is a public comment. The city clerk indicated that, and take the public comment. And of course, if there are any follow-up questions for staff, happy to answer them at that time. Thank you.
Yeah, we have 2 speaker cards on this. One is from Elaine Miles, and the second would be Pat Miller. So as the public isn't overly confused, it appears that Pat has lost the coin toss and is going first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pat Miller, I'm president of the Sutter County Taxpayers Association. And as I stated at the last city council meeting, the Recology rate increase is not justified. I once again contacted the Central Valley Regional Water Board to ask if there were new regulations or requirements. The response from Wendy Wiles, Supervisor, Compliance and Enforcement Section of the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board was, and I quote, "The regulations have not changed. What has changed is the implementation of those regulations based on the conditions found to date at the landfill," end quote. I.e., the green waste processing plant did not comply with Title 27 and the conditions needed to be cleaned up to comply with Title 27 and the 2003 WDRs. The staff report falsely states that starting in 2012, the Central Valley Water Board conducted an inspection and requested more information on the Feather River Organics composting facility and the closed landfill. Contrary to that statement, the Water Board was involved much earlier than 2012 and issued 2 notices of violation, one on April 14, 2011, and another on August 12, 2011. Wendy Wiles stated in an email to me dated October 1, 2015, that there had been inspections of the Feather River Organics operation between 2003 and 2013. So this was an ongoing problem that was not corrected to comply with Title 27 and the 2003 WDRs. There are no new regulations. The requirements were to force Recology to comply with Title 27 and the 2003 WDRs. If you vote to approve this rate increase, you are betraying the citizens who elected you to watch out for their best interests. There are no new regulations, therefore a rate increase is not justified. I urge you to do the right thing and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we'll hear from Elaine Miles.
Thank you for letting me get up there slower. I don't know all the things that she just presented, but I believe them because she does a lot of research. This issue is very troublesome and it's expensive for the ratepayers. using green solutions and more, as was presented last time with the slides, would save us $200,000. Yes, they are not fully permitted, but should be within a few months. Why not let them handle what they are currently permitted for, and then, when they are fully permitted, give them the entire green waste business? It appears terribly foolish to spend the money to adjust the green waste recycling plant at the Marysville location, when a new green waste recycling plant is or will be constructed at the Ostrom Road dump site and ready in about 4 years. Throwing all this money down the drain just doesn't compute to me. It's kind of like fixing your house up and then tearing it down. It just doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members from the public wish to speak on this item?
Good evening. I'm Phil Graham with Recology. I just wanted to make some statements regarding the comments that were just made. It is true that the regulations did not change. However, our permit requirements absolutely did. And it is true that the general order for compost operations did expire in 2003, but it was not until 2013 that those WDRs were changed for our site-specific conditions. So I just wanted to make mention of that. So yeah, and the inspections that were referenced in 2011, those were for ponding issues, and those issues were corrected. So just wanted to make that known. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, we'll close it for the public comment portion and bring it back to council for any discussion.
I'll start it off here. Being as one of the ones that felt that there was insufficient data backup at the time we met last to vote in a positive direction. I will go through, and it may be just slightly lengthy because there were a couple of different issues going on at the same time, actually more than a couple. I spent 25 hours of study and analysis on this to make sure that all the questions that were asked by the public of various people, to make sure that I had them all answered for me to be able to justify whatever vote that I make on this decision. So I hope to answer some of that. Some of the questions being asked were, how did Recology get into the situation they were in regarding to the operation of Feather River Organics? Was Recology responsible for the situation? That's one kind of part of the question. Another one is the plan to stay with Feather River Organics the right course of action? I think the study from Sloan and Vasquez at the time, at this moment, that it definitely answered that they're not ready, and the length of time that it would take to get there. After all, my other study also said that it probably would be not the right time to make the change. Number 4, if Recology for the River Organics is the right course, is the proposed option being presented the best plan of action out of the 4 plans presented to the RWMA in September of 2015, but not presented to the City Council on October 6th of 2015, since the item was pulled from the agenda. It was number 14, and I actually have that. I went on to that date, pulled it off of there, and it actually is a very good presentation. It's a very good agenda item. Read through it, and it's actually a decent presentation, except for missing one critical portion of it that would answer another question. If that had been presented last week, separated from the idea of saying these are the 4 options for who's going to provide, or is it going to be a good option to go with somebody else, there would have been much more clarification on that. Next, I had a difficult time getting across to some people when I was trying to gather information what I wanted. I was asking for data and documents on the 4 options that were presented to the RWMA. I couldn't seem to get that across. They were stuck on the idea that it was the 4 options of the providing of green waste companies. Well, finally got that straightened out. I had to go directly to Recology. Thank you, Mike, for getting this information to me. It definitely answered one of my major questions. These are the document that we needed to have also back in October 6th. It would have clarified a lot back then too for us. It has on there all the options and which and why, and a complete breakdown. So I have that answered. I've decided that the option that is being presented is the best option overall out of the 4 options that were presented. So now with these new documents and the timeline chart, which is my exhibit number 3, timeline chart that I took apart, and that was from 2003 when Senate Bill 390, action number 96031, which had to do with the WDR waivers that were canceled. That's when the law changed, was 2003. Composting continued and continued on expired waivers. Whose fault was that? That was my question. It wasn't Recology's. They were operating under expired because the Regional Water Quality Control Board failed to do their duty and establish new criteria for them to get wastewater or their water processing and how to do it. It wasn't Recology's fault. They were waiting on them. And through that timeline, it shows that yes, they were inspected. The Regional Water Quality Control Board did their duties on that, even though they knew that it was on expired. So you get all the way down to, I guess it's 2012. Recology was asked to give them a new application. They gave the application. The Water Quality Board said they needed more data. Not Recology's fault. They hadn't even given any criteria yet for what they were looking for. Finally, 2013, or was it 13? I can't remember exactly when. I have that written on another piece of paper. They came back, Recology sent their plans to them, and they rejected them and said they're not good enough. We need to have a better criteria. So Recology says, well, what are you going to base it upon? And they decided, the Regional Water Board said that they're going to base it upon a 25-year rain event on a 24-hour period. And that's what they needed to design their system. Recology has done that. In fact, they've gone over that. Their proposal is to go slightly over that because, well, it's a good thing they're going to do that because this last rain event we had would have overswept that system. So it's a good thing that they're looking a little heavier on that. So what I've come to the conclusion of, it's not Recology's fault. They're operating as best as they could without the waivers being there. And when they did have some kind of a ponding event that woke up the Regional Water Quality Control Board and said, oh, we got to do something about this. New staffing, new changes. So all of a sudden they're starting to require these things, and they shot for the moon on them. And so Recology is going to have to do that. Also, within the contract, there's a requirement that the agencies that are part of the RWMA have to basically make good whatever improvements are required by the state of California and the regulations. And so we have to cover the costs. That comes down to those 4 options. They came up with the least expensive option. And I will agree it's the least expensive. Even though that tank, I went to Mike, he could tell you, Mike Leggins, I said, is there some way we can, the lifespan of that tank's going to be much more than the 3 years that we're going to be able to use it. Is there any way that we could get amortization changed? Well, basically no, because it's for the length of our contract, which is going to be 3 years left by the time they get it installed. We are required to cover that cost. So that's cut and dried in the contract. So at this point, it is the cheapest way to do it, even if they're going to drop off the usage of it in the near future. If they have to extend it because they don't have the next facility built, we should get a rate reduction or credit for that because we would have already paid for it. So if that comes up, these things have been discussed. So that's taken care of that. So I'll get to the last 2 exhibits that I have here regarding the public's questions. First, was there a change in law since SB 390 in 2003? No change in law, change in application, which was the responsibility of the regional water quality control board, which they did not do their responsibility until 2012, 13, and 14. Second, should Recology Yuba City have reasonably foreseen there would be a change in the interpretation or an application of existing law? I say they did know that, and they operated as best they could without the Water Quality Board doing their job. And when they did get hit with it, they did what they had to do to comply as fast as they could comply. Third, does Exhibit 1 reflect the reasonable in the agenda, which is the breakdown of the proposed option for what they're asking for? Reflect the reasonable estimate of additional cost for the project proposed. And what about the other 3 options? Well, I went and got the numbers for it. They're all right here. It is definitely the least expensive, even though that big tank is going to be decommissioned at that time. It is still the least expensive. By far, I think it came out to $3 million less. Because the renting of what they call the tanks, the temporary Baker tanks, is very expensive to rent those. So it'd be better for them to own the tank and least expensive for the community and the taxpayers. So at this point, all the questions that I had, which I didn't have data to support what was being asked or said, I have found, but it took me 25 hours of extra study, which I'm glad to do it to make sure the right decisions are made and supported by actual factual data. So at this point, I'm at this time, the contract, I have satisfied myself, and hopefully this will help the public's questions to be adequately addressed. Thank you.
Any other comments from members of council? Direction from council?
No. Stop the light. Okay. I wanted to just go ahead and add a couple more comments with that. I'm sorry, I have a cold, so I'm fighting this. So if I get into a coughing frenzy, excuse me. I wanted to go through a couple of comments. I also did not have all the data prior to the previous meeting, so I want to thank Mike, Jackie, Phil, for actually extending, sitting down. We actually sat for several hours to go over all the documentation. I requested the actual letters that went back and forth between Recology and the Water Quality Control Board. So I actually got the letters that went back and forth between the two. And with the requirements that were asked of, Recology continued to do what they needed to do. The letters would indicate that they were suffice, and then another requirement would be added, and they went back and forth. So it showed through those correspondence and the timeline that as the requirements were being built on, as time was changing, Recology was actually meeting the requirements, and then they were added on or changed, and Recology would go back and actually act upon it, and then it would change. So I actually have the letters from the board to document that. One of the questions that came up, or one of the comments last time, was the penalty was not a violation of the 2003 WDR. It's a violation of the 2013 excuse me, cleanup and abatement order. And I actually have the basis of the clean and abatement order. And again, it goes through indicating that it's the additional activities that go, the maintenance activities that continue, and over a period of time, that the settlement there becomes the low spots, and that's where you get the ponding, the stormwater, the landfill gases, and so forth. And they were asked to go ahead and produce a work plan, and they have continued to do that. I again have the documentation that they've been constantly working on this. And so at this point, this is the option that has come up, and looking at all the figures as well, according to what, if we continue as I indicated last time, and now having the actual figures in front of me, to continue as is would cost us more as taxpayers, and the option that's presented in front of us is the better option. And I am going to start coughing really bad, so I'm going to stop at that point. But I feel like the questions that came up in the previous meeting have also been answered. And I want to, again, extend my thanks to staff, Steve, as well as Recology, who spent many hours with me to actually go through the entire timeline and go through the history of where we are. I do want to add, though, in the service agreement, under the term of agreement, it does say extension of initial term, that there's the possibility of 3 extensions that can take place. And I am strongly recommending, as I did last time, that at the end, as this agreement expires in 2019, that we go out for a competitive bid. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from members of council?
Through the mayor,
Go ahead.
I'd like to recommend that we adopt a resolution amending the 2011 collection service agreement with Recology Yuba City relating to the green waste diversion program, as I did 2 weeks ago.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. In light of the locked vote that we had last time, I'd ask the clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Dukes?
Aye.
Councilmember Didball?
Yes.
Councilmember Gill?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cleveland?
Yes.
Mayor Buckland?
Aye. Thank you very much.